So, Attorney General Campbell, I think the last time we talked to you was before the election, and we talked
Well,
about...
before we even go to the election, because
Yes.
clearly there's a range of emotions there, I just have to tell you, I look like I have, well, maybe actually this makes me look great, but like beach hair.
She
My
says so
hair
herself.
is straight. You have to stand in who you are.
I
That's
understand.
right.
Fine.
You do.
And love yourself.
You
It's
do.
really
Fine.
important. But I just have to, so my hair is all wet. I was soaking wet earlier.
It looks
because-
good.
Thank you.
You're
But
welcome.
I was outside in Framingham with fellow electeds and a whole host of volunteers at the Pearl Street Cupboard, which does remarkable work with the Greater Boston Food Bank and United Way, Tri-County, handing out, millions in pounds of food for folks. Big, huge bags for Thanksgiving. And so I just had to acknowledge them. It's Thanksgiving season. There's a lot of folks right now who sadly are dealing with hunger and insecurity. And even in Massachusetts, nearly 1 in 3 families on a daily basis in our great Commonwealth, which I think is the best state in the country, are still struggling with hunger and hunger insecurity. And you had folks in the pouring rain, cold, out there handing out food. And I just have to lift folks up because I know there's a lot going on in the world, but there are beautiful, bright spots that we should celebrate and that bring tremendous joy. So,
Well, but just
Yeah.
to extend that, yesterday we were lucky enough to talk to a guy who's walking 43 miles from Springfield to, I think, Greenfield. That'd be Congressperson Jim McGovern.
right, that's
to
right.
raise money.
He's been a leader
and
on
Jim
these issues.
called in, and he's
That's right.
raising money for the Western Mass Food Bank,
That's
a
right.
variation of the same theme, and has been a leader
And
in Washington on
Congressman
these
Clark
issues.
was with us.
Yeah,
Congresswoman
great.
Catherine Clark and Senate President Spilka and many other local electeds. It was great.
Great time to care for your fellow humans.
That's
correct.
right.
Well, okay, so back to this thing that some of us in Massachusetts and across the country are very upset about the results of the election. We talked about you had known Kamala Harris and had worked with her and campaigned for her. She didn't win. But now the concern is, what can Massachusetts do? What can you do as the Attorney General to deflect from the worst of what President-elect Trump may be planning for here?
I will say, like many folks, including some in my office, and I don't want to suggest that everyone in my office voted for Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. I respect people's decisions here and whoever they voted, including within my own team. I obviously was very disappointed and devastated by the results. Said a lot of prayers and dusted myself off and went into the office and told my team, number one, it's really important that folks acknowledge whatever emotions they're feeling, anxiety, depression, if you're going through stages of grief, and to take time to care for themselves. I'm always promoting that. I think we don't do that very well. And even to my surprise, I had a team member who came up to me after we had some town halls in the office to create space to chat about the recent election, that she had gone home and her spouse had gone to work and no one brought up the election at all, which is just crazy to me. So that's just number one. And we said the same to our constituents. Take care of yourselves, your children. It's a difficult time, to say the least. And regardless of even who you voted for, the divisiveness we're seeing in this country is real. And it has impacts, especially on our children and our overall well-being. So one, take care of yourselves. And then I told my team and anyone else in the public that I was able to speak to that we're ready. And bring it on. Any threats that come from Washington, D.C., that threaten the work we have done here in Massachusetts, we're ready to respond if it threatens people's rights, if it threatens their security, whether in healthcare, housing, access to reproductive health care, gender-affirming care, if it threatens their very existence, so the rhetoric around LGBTQ plus communities, including our trans youth, our immigrants, we're prepared. And we're prepared to fight and to fight back, with the hopes that this new administration will be collaborative, but our eyes are wide open because the rhetoric during the election spoke to a different type of administration we'll have to deal with. And if people didn't know before, I used to stress and ask folks, do you know who your Attorney General is? Because I knew the importance of my role in this office's role in people's daily life. Now people know. Right now, the number one elected in many ways on the front lines to respond to any threats to our people here are AGs. And so I'm blessed to work with some great AGs across the country and look forward to fighting back to protect our residents here in Mass.
You know, you said you were hopeful, and you were talking about what Trump and Vance said before the election. Let's talk for 1 second about what they've said since the election. Mayor Wu was with us after, and she said this about this mass deportation. proposal that allegedly is going to start on day one, January 20th. I'll read you part of what she said. The Boston Trust Act puts strict prohibitions on local law enforcement from being pulled into becoming the enforcement arm for the whims of whatever the sort of approach of federal immigration law might be. This is not something that is possible under the laws in Boston. I thought pretty respectful. Here's the response, I would say grotesquely disrespectful, from Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, responding to what Mayor Wu had to say here at WCVB, a whole bunch of places saying this is what the law of Boston is. Here's Homan.
So she helps us, she gets the hell out of the way, because they're going to do it. And look, there's a clear line here, and they can't cross a clear line. I'll suggest she read Title 8, United States Code 1324 III, that says, you can't harbor or conceal an illegal alien in front of law enforcement officers. So I hope she don't cross that line.
So I hope she don't cross that line. She gets the hell out of the way unless she helps us. I mean, this is post-election, so the intention is pretty clear. Are you as confident as Governor Healy is and the mayor in Boston is that we have the ability in Massachusetts to resist aiding the federal government in this effort?
So I first have to take a step back and acknowledge that I spoke just a minute ago about how I am absolutely prepared to fight for our constituents here in Massachusetts, including those who identify as a part of our immigrant community, a very robust community that contributes not just culturally, but economically. If President-elect is able to proceed with his mass deportation plan of millions of people, it will disrupt significant industries here, including our healthcare industry, higher ed, those who serve our elders and elder care tremendously. And then also, it's not as easy as people think. Because if you're talking about mass deportation of folks in the millions, you are going to be rounding up folks who are here legally. Simple as that. And so this is fear-mongering. This is also, of course, fueled by hatred and fear of other. So I just want to name that. As I am talking to my colleagues, and we're collectively naming what is coming to us in terms of this rhetoric, we are prepared to fight collectively and together. So with Mayor Wu, the governor, it's going to take all of us. And I told them our AG's office is willing to step up and protect them. So, for example, we can't really reply to hypotheticals. They're talking about what they're going to do, but yet have not produced any plan on how they're going to do it. We have not just our Constitution, we have state laws, some local ordinances that are applicable here to help us fight back. And I have to name that we're prepared and ready to fight back on any plan to mass deport our people. But two other things I want to stress that I think is really important. Our office, every single day, is out there fighting to protect the public safety of our residents and holding folks accountable if they commit crimes in Massachusetts. That's whether they are immigrants, those with no paperwork, or U.S. citizens. That accountability work we have already been doing. And here you have folks suggesting that we haven't, and actually just fear-mongering, suggesting that a whole group of people is out there committing illegal crimes every day. It's not true. And we are in the we're in the business every single day of protecting our people, and we're going to keep doing that, right? We're going to also recognize that at moments, some of the people perpetuating crimes in our communities may be undocumented. And if we are holding them accountable, as this office does every single day, the AG's office does this on a regular basis, they are deported. So we're already doing the work. And so right now you have an incoming administration threatening people's rights, and we're prepared to defend them. And I just remind folks, everyone should be concerned about this rhetoric because it will disrupt industries and the contributions of so many folks here in Massachusetts. And we're prepared to fight back. And let me tell you, on day one, good luck. It's not happening on day one. And why is that? Because you have AGs all across the country ready and prepared to use the rule of law to fight back on these deportation plans that would threaten the interests of folks in Massachusetts.
Well, there are also a bunch of AGs that treat people who are not born here as subhuman species, and I assume they are totally ready to cooperate with this administration, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
Can we raise one more thing before we get to the calls? 877-301-8970. We spoke to you a lot before November 5th about question one, which would allow the auditor to audit the legislature. It was opposed by the legislature. They would not come on the show to defend their position or anywhere else, as far as I know. And in an act of what I consider to be grotesque irresponsibility, Senate President and the Speaker said, even before the voters had spoken, we may just change this thing depending on the margin. Well, the margin was a mere 72%. 71.6%. When you certified the question for the ballot, you said at the same time, there still may be constitutional issues, even if this were to become law. It is law, or will be law as soon as the process goes through with the governor's office. What are the constitutional issues? Do you support what the voters supported? Where are you now?
Well, I absolutely support the will of the voters and a more transparent government. I've been on the record on those issues since I was on the city council. Expanding the public records law, making sure not only our operations in the State House or in other branches of government are more transparent to the public. Absolutely support that. Right now, I have the auditor pushing for our office to get involved. There is no role for our office to play right now.
Why can't you make a pronouncement like you did when you certified the question? There was no obligation on your part to say there may be remaining constitutional issues. Why can't you say now, if you believe it, there are no constitutional issues,
Well,
the
we don't
voters
know
have
that.
spoken?
No, we don't know that. And why don't we know that? There's no role for my office to play right now. We certified the ballot question. The voters spoke. I respect the will of the voters. Now, the second piece is this law doesn't go into effect until 30 days. So right now, nothing can happen until the law that just passed actually goes into effect. And then once that passes, the legislature can respond to the auditor's letter and say, we're going to give you X information or Y information in response to her. And if she feels as though she doesn't get what she's demanded of them, they both could say, well, we think we've given you an adequate amount. She can say, you haven't. Then they can create a legal dispute and then ask our office to get involved. Right now, as we stand here, you have
They
a law.
both might ask you to get
They
involved.
might. So right now, as we stand here, though, we have the law hasn't gone into effect because we haven't had the 30 days. Number two, there is no legal dispute. So I, in my office, as the Attorney General's office, has no role right now. And so I want to clarify that for the public because there's this suggestion out there that we do. We do not. Give it 30 days. They will have to have their back and forth. And then, depending on what that dispute becomes, they can then seek to try to resolve it via litigation. Then we might be able to get involved. But right now, we're dealing with nothing but hypotheticals.
Fair enough. Kate in Cambridge, you're first with the Attorney General. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure.
I have a compound question. I am an early educator for the past 25 years. And at making $52,000, I was told as a single parent with 2 kids that I didn't qualify for EBT benefits. So what is the state going to do to revamp the system to, one, support educators who are already at the bottom tier of the education, poll? And how are we going to change the standards that are outdated?
Well, Kate, I think this is more of a question possibly for the administration and the legislature, but if you could stay on, if there's something specific on your particular case and we can be helpful, we're happy to look into it. But if you want to stay on, we're happy to continue the conversation with you with respect to your particular issue and then have a larger policy conversation. And I will say, in addition to our litigation tools, which are significant and of course going to be really appropriate in the new year, we do file legislation in our office to solve different problems, and we take the lead on a whole host of things. So if that looks like it could be helpful at some point, we want to be helpful. We support educators, and we certainly support early ed providers, especially as a mom of 2 young boys. So if you want to stay on, Kate, that would be helpful.
Yeah, our producers will get your contact info and pass it along.
One of the things we did learn from this election, cost of living is a huge issue for people across the country, and particularly here in Massachusetts. Cost of housing is huge. Under the Baker administration, we had this MBTA communities law, which said around T-stops, people were going to make up plans to build more housing. A lot of towns went along with it. Milton didn't. They objected to it. Now you get Needham objecting to this too. They're going to go to the polls to vote on a new housing plan. So is this going to happen? Or, are we going to get somewhere with this, or is this going to be one town after another after another?
Well, we don't know. I want to stress, and I don't think it gets the attention it deserves, there are over 100 municipalities that have come into compliance, working towards compliance, and actually more working towards compliance or in compliance than towns that are not. And here you have a community actually where a bylaw was passed, and now you have a few residents who are upset with the efforts by local folks to actually come into compliance, but who are upset trying to stop that from happening. And I hope they don't, because the last I checked, housing and affordability is the #1 issue
Yep.
that people are dealing with, and not just in Massachusetts, across this entire country. Right now, the median sales price of a home is close to $1 million. That affects public employees, elders who want to downsize, young people who are graduating from our colleges, who want to stay here. It affects employers and the business community. The list is long. And people will leave Massachusetts if they can't afford to stay here. And so you had a Republican governor, obviously Governor Baker, a Democratic legislature that came together and said, we need a mandatory policy, not a volunteer policy. If you have the public, if you have the T in your community as a public good, you have an obligation to build more dense housing in order to be able to help us with this housing crisis. And the best thing about the law that also needs to be lifted up is that it provides municipalities with incredible flexibility in the ability to not only figure out where to build that housing, how to build that housing, but to also work with us. And we want to continue to provide technical assistance, and we hope municipalities will work with us to address this housing crisis.
By the way, in fairness, when you said a few people, almost 4,000 people signed the petition to get the voters. So there are a lot of people in Needham that are unhappy with what their town meeting did, right?
For me, that's a few people.
Okay.
And why is that? When you look at the bulk of municipalities and local leaders, and I would say millions of people who not only supported the passage of the MBTA Communities Law in the first place, but also their municipality coming into compliance. I mean, people are bending over backwards at local election authorities, local town officials, working with community on education to help them come into compliance. And I want to lift them up, not the few that want to stand in the way of progress.
Do you know what I ever thought about? If you end up losing the case with Milton at the SJC.
I'm not putting that in
I
the
know you're
universe.
not, but assuming that you do, for argument's sake.
I'm not.
Would a town that voted under the law that was nullified by the court would their vote still be in effect, or because it was under the, you don't want to answer the question?
No, we have no idea.
Okay.
Because we have no idea what
Okay.
the court's going to come back with, and
Okay.
especially in terms of the remedy. We
Here's a
don't know.
text from Craig. Whose job is it to ensure that teachers obey the laws against going on strike? If there's state law, why does it not appear to ever be enforced? And people know there are still two teachers' unions on the North Shore on
Beverly,
strike.
Marblehead.
Bart, that's right. What's the answer?
And so a couple of things. I've expressed my concern publicly on the teachers on strike that have been on strike for over 2 weeks now, keeping kids out of school, and it's unacceptable. Right now, our kids need to be in school, and they can be in school while negotiations continue with the hopes that the teachers and, of course, the school district can come together and resolve their issues. Kids need to be in school. The effect it's having on their learning, their development, also the parents, including parents that don't have flexibility at their jobs, and the divisiveness it's creating in a community is unacceptable. Right now in Massachusetts, the law is what it is, which does not grant teachers the right to strike. And as the Attorney General, whose responsibility is to enforce the law, I have concerns about it. The hiccup here that is different than, say, the enforcement of our MBTA Communities Law, or even my involvement if at some point there's a legal dispute between the auditor and the legislature on the ballot question, is we actually don't have a role here, in that we don't represent CERB, which is the entity that is in court and engaging with the court on the enforcement of that strike law. So we don't have a direct role to play. Hence you see the governor, of course, the lieutenant governor, governor's legal, working and doing their best. And then the other piece of this is our young people have a constitutional right to education. And that's the part that I think people are exploring right now. Who has standing to challenge what's going on? It may be parents, it may be someone else. But directly in terms of our ability to represent this particular board, we don't have that.
But your
unlike other
position, just so I'm
agencies.
clear, is the teachers should return to work.
Yes.
And what do you think of the labor board reversing in the last couple of days what had been precedent for years and ruling, state labor board, ruling that the communities in question had no obligation to bargain at all with workers, teachers, while they're striking? It's a reversal of age-old policy here.
It is. Well, I will say, obviously in Beverly, they still showed up to negotiate. And that, I think, that you should afford them some credit there. They're still rolling up their sleeves to hope to get to an agreement with
What do
the
you think of the
teachers union.
decision, though, by the state labor board?
it's expansive, but I'm more concerned about, we have a law on the books that says teachers can't strike, and we're seeing more municipalities where teachers are striking. We don't have a direct role in the AG's office, and this is actually on the exception side. This is not the norm, to represent a board in this context. And so even when it came up in Newton, we sort of watched it unfold from a distance, really pushing folks on all sides to come to an agreement and to do it quickly so it wouldn't harm our kids. We're doing the same thing here, and working with the administration, including the governor and lieutenant governor, and everyone else to get our kids back into school, especially our kids who are most vulnerable and kids on IEPs and with disabilities. It is extremely concerning. And for folks who may think this is not applicable to them, I think the concern that people have is it can come to their municipality next.
Yeah, and if it's, well, we'll move on. 877-301-8970 is the number if you want to call or text. The Attorney General is going to be with us until the top of the hour. I've had a couple of emails about Enrique Delgado Garcia, who was a 25-year-old state trooper recruit who died in supposedly a boxing training thing back in September. And people are wondering, it's now November, what is taking so long in this investigation into what happened to him?
So as I said to his family, obviously when I attended his services and had the opportunity to engage with his family that I am sure remains devastated by the loss of Enrique, I, along with team members, felt the same way. He was young, he was looking to become a state trooper and to serve the Commonwealth, and obviously tragically died at a young age. So what my obligation was to immediately find someone to look into this who had significant transparency and can help us move down a path of accountability. That is ongoing. David Meyer, who I appointed, is doing a great job, I think. He knows what he's doing. He has decades of experience. And like I asked the family, I said the same thing to his fellow classmates and so many others. Please be patient. It is an investigation. That means it must be thorough. You're talking to people, not just people who were there before, during, after. So it has to be comprehensive. And you cannot do a thorough and a comprehensive investigation and get folks the answers they need in a short period of time. So he is actively working. I appointed him as quickly as I could, finding the best person to do the job. And as soon as that concludes, we'll come back and report publicly as to what's going on.
Sammy and Melrose, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Welcome.
Hey, Attorney General
Hi,
Campbell.
Sammy.
How you doing? But I'm a Lyft driver, and I just, have something I wanted to communicate about their policies. First of all, I wanted to thank you for suing Lyft and making them give drivers a livable minimum wage. It has made a huge difference, and you might have earned my vote for life for that alone.
Thank you.
But basically, the company's deactivation policy, that's how they can fire their drivers, remains horrendous. So I just want to tell you a quick story which shows that. Mm-hmm. About a month ago, I tried to log onto my Lyft account and got a message saying my account was on hold. That was on a Friday night. And so for the next week, I spent most of my waking hours texting representatives through their app. It's pretty much impossible to get a phone number where you can actually talk to a human being. So I was trying to resolve this. And their incompetence was SNL skit level absurd. They kept telling me I needed to reply to an email that they sent, but that I'd never actually received it. When I told them I didn't get the email, they told me to wait and they'd resend it, which they never did. I asked if I could actually talk to someone on the phone, and they said someone would call me. That never happened. So this went on for basically a week. So what ended up happening was I ended up contacting Lyft through their website, and someone finally got back to me. And here's the deal. A rider has said I'd verbally abused them and spat on them, okay? Now, this was absurd. I'll be 49 in a few days.
Hey,
and
Sammy, I hate to do this. We have tons of calls. Can you get to the question, and then maybe the details or something you and the Attorney General's office could discuss off air, if that's okay with you?
Fair enough. So finally, what I'm saying is, at Lyft and Uber, a driver can be permanently deactivated if they get certain reports. There needs to be no evidence whatsoever. All that's required is a rider saying something about you. Lyft eventually reinstated me, but they told me if I got another report, I could be permanently deactivated. And, it's America in 2024. I know of no other job where someone can be
You're exactly right,
completely
Sammy.
fired without any evidence whatsoever. So I just wanted to know, can your office do anything to help out with this?
Absolutely.
And I'm more than willing to work with your office in any way I can to help get rid of these atrocious policies.
Sammy, while the Attorney General is answering, we're going to put you on hold, and we'll take your contact info and give it to her office.
Yes.
So stick around, please. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Attorney General.
This is great. So, Sammy, thank you for the call, and thank you for lifting up this work that this office did to support drivers for both Lyft and Uber. It is precedent and historic in the country in terms of ensuring drivers like Sammy got access to a living wage, over $32 an hour. In addition, paid benefits, workers' comp, access to health care. They had none of this before, and this affected, of course, millions of drivers in the country. And Uber and Lyft would have you suggest that they did it. They did not. It was our office that did it. But on this deactivation piece, that also was a part of our settlement. So, Sammy, stay on.
Oh.
It was the number one issue we actually heard from drivers in terms of their concern with Uber and Lyft, where they could just be deactivated.
Deactivate is a euphemism for fired.
You're fired.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
You're removed from the platform. You
Okay.
get no notice. Under our settlement with them, they are required to give a written notification that they are deactivated. And you give the notification so that the driver can challenge and also have a right to an appeal. Never happened before, but that's what's required now. So, Sam, if you could stay on the line.
Great.
And one thing the settlement requires is an ongoing back and forth between my office and these companies to continue to implement the provisions of the settlement. But deactivation, we worked on that, and I'm excited for what it can do for drivers, including in the context of Sammy.
Sammy, thanks for the call.
Thank
Before
you.
we take a break, I know in the
Yeah.
next month we're going to get a lot of texts and emails here saying, I want to give to a charity, but I don't know which are the legit ones, which are the ones that all the money goes to administration. Is your
the
office
Giving
helping this?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have actually updated guidance coming out soon for Giving Tuesday, so folks not only know what they should look for, but before they give, how to do that research on organization, make sure it's a legitimate organization. So more guidance will come. We play a role when it comes to charities, nonprofits, but so does the Secretary of State. So folks should check out our website soon, and also the Secretary of State.
Website is?
mass.gov/AGO.
Great.
Attorney General, this is another why is it taking so long question from survivors of clergy sexual abuse. A bunch of people from Fall River, Worcester, Springfield sat down with then Attorney General Maura Healey's office in 2021 to talk about what was happening. A lot of it at this Whitensville Treatment Center, where children and teenagers allegedly abused. And Terry McKernan, who's president of Bishop Accountability, also was involved. I've known him for a long time. They've done great work, actually, in tracking this
They
clergy
have.
sexual abuse stuff.
They have.
And says that even though there was a grand jury involved when Tom Riley was the Attorney General a million years ago, he was very quick to release these reports. And people are wondering, again, Terry McKernan says there's no urgency here, even given the alleged secrecy of, well, not alleged secrecy, there is secrecy of grand jury proceedings. Why,
Right.
again, is this taking so long?
I don't want to discount the work of this incredible organization and so many others in helping survivors, especially in the context of clergy abuse. I am grateful for the leadership of folks, including those who participate in any type of investigation, to relive their harm in order to make sure folks are held accountable. I inherited this, and where it is in the courts, and I can't say anything more. I wish I could, but I can't. When I can, folks will hear from me, including details as to why I can't say anything more right now. And in terms of past investigations where there is a grand jury involved, it depends on when you're allowed to release something based on grand jury proceedings. It depends. I have no idea what authority, or I should say, what was given to, say, A.G. Riley then, what his office did. It depends. But in the context of this one, I can't say any more because it is the court that has to go through a process.
Which court? Is it the
I can't,
Superior Court?
Let's just say I want to just leave it alone.
Wait a second, you can't tell us what the court is?
Yes, I think it's Superior Court, but I can give
Okay.
details on the
Okay.
actual.
Okay.
Why I want to be careful is, in a public setting like this, I want to be careful not even in naming the court or the judge that is involved to create some type of issue where I suggest, for example, the judge is standing in the way of transparency or a court is standing in the way of transparency. It is a process when you have an investigation and a grand jury process as a part of that investigation. it's a process, and I need folks, and I'm asking them to be a little bit more patient as it goes through that process before I can say more.
But you can't even say if it's if the diocese or the objectors, because they object to everything that is transparent. You can't. Okay, fair enough. John in Nantucket, she is nodding, I think, in agreement that you can't. John in Nantucket, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, John.
Thank you very much, Jim, Marjorie, and A.G. Campbell. I'm greatly appreciative of this opportunity to see if there's anything you can do to help us out. About 25 years ago, we bought our house on a public road on Nantucket. Had about 30 homes on it. In January, about 5 years ago, we lost part of our road and access to our homes for about 12 houses. The town did a land swap with Nantucket Conservation to provide access back to our road for this dozen houses. For the last 4 years, we've been going down a neighbor's driveway and imposing on them, and they have said they're no longer going to extend that courtesy as of this March. The town is trying to require the 12 homeowners to pay for the implementation of the of the road and make us pay for any ongoing maintenance. Is there no obligation for a town or municipality to provide access to a home when we purchased it on a public road? And is there anything you might be able to do to help?
Well, John, I'm going to have you follow up on this one if you don't mind staying on, because there may be more details and specifics that we need. And I always want to be careful. And yes, I am the Attorney General, but sometimes can offer legal advice, and sometimes I can't. But John, if you could stay on, it is not uncommon at moments for our office to get involved in land disputes or things with municipalities or public and private owners. That has happened. But if you could stay on and leave your contact information, we will follow up with you ASAP.
John, hold on. As the Attorney General said, we'll get your info and pass it along.
Yeah. Can I just name something?
Of course you can.
On the abuse question that we got.
Yeah.
And like I said, I never want to discount that
Right.
because many of the victims we're talking about in the context of a larger issue of clergy abuse are kids, right? And the lack of transparency and lack of accountability. But I would point to folks, if they were following Maryland, for example, including my colleague who was elected the same year as me, he went through a process. It wasn't a slow one, but he went through a process in order to be able to release certain information, even in redacted form. We're going through a similar process. And so I want folks to know we're not just sitting at the office doing nothing with respect to ensuring there's transparency on this issue. And I never want to discount that, because the folks that do this work either have been abused themselves, they do this work because it's pain they're turning into purpose to help others. So we're not sitting on our hands. When you go through a process, unfortunately, it involves several different stakeholders. But I didn't want to discount the advocacy, and I wanted to name that we are on it, and also looking to states like Maryland, who did this most recently as well.
But it's your position before the court that you do want to disclose this? Is the court aware of that?
I am saying nothing.
Okay.
But there's a bigger picture
I
here.
can't. I literally can't.
In all the postmortems about the election, bigger picture here that talk about how Democratic cities often, Massachusetts is a pretty secretive place in general. The government is very secretive in Massachusetts, unlike a lot of other states.
It's the most secretive in the United States
yeah,
of America.
that things kind of drag on, and there's a lot of complaining about the courts being really slow. Trials end at 4 o'clock. I think they could end at 5, actually, and get that extra hour in there. But that we're very, very slow in the old justice delayed is justice denied kind of thing, and that people have to wait so long for resolution.
And I understand that not only from a professional lens, and I work with a team that is, I often would say maybe overworked and underpaid, because they're passionate public servants. They could be making a lot more resources in the private sector. They choose to do this work because they care about service. They care about transparency. They care about accountability and compassionate leadership. All of us professionally care about that. And for me, it's personal. I often talk about my twin brother, Andre, dying while in the custody of the Department of Corrections.
Yes.
My family, to this day, has no idea how that happened. There was no one ever held accountable. And even when I was sharing that story, no one called me up and said, hello, we'd like to talk to you about that. It just doesn't sound right. He didn't receive health care. What happened there? No accountability. And I have learned to accept that and receive it in the context of his case, and to actually take whatever angst and anger that I had years ago and to turn it into work into meaning. And for me, that means using the tools of this office to ensure folks transparency, but most importantly, accountability. And so that's why I wanted to say a little bit more on that, because that is abuse, that is harm, that is family violence, that is violence. And we take that very seriously. But the rule of law, including our legal system here in Massachusetts, prohibits me from saying more than that we're going through a process. And when I can say more, we will be sure to make sure that we come back to this space and so many others to share directly with folks that were involved.
And for people that don't know, your brother was very young,
He was 29.
29.
So speaking of transparency and accountability, two quick things. Well, one quick, what not so quick. Attorney General, the SJC ruled unanimously a week or so ago that in these occasionally secret magistrate proceedings, we're the only state that has them, I still don't understand why we do, the names of the Johns who were involved in these cases around, I think it was 3 owners of these establishments where there was prostitution have already been charged. The women, I think correctly, are not being charged. Do you support the SJC's decision that the names of all of these men should be made public?
Well, we were arguing this case on behalf of the magistrate. So we were for transparency and greater transparency than, say, the defense counsel for the various folks that were involved.
However.
And no,
Oh, okay.
No, and I will say why we think this is important is as we do our human trafficking work, for it's bigger, as we do our human trafficking work, and shout out to Jen Snook and the entire team, they do incredible work. It is really difficult to get accountability for folks that are trafficked, and it happens here in Massachusetts. And why? Because victims, right, they don't necessarily want to come forward or have to appear in court and to testify and to share. And so one strategy that people have been thinking about as we work with advocates is how do you go after those Johns? How do you hold them accountable? And at the same time, why is this difficult? Because sometimes it's the very one of the many Johns that is key to you actually getting a victim accountability because they come forward as a witness. So I just want to say that we are actively thinking about how we can be more creative in the shaming of Johns, within the confines of the law, of course, to hold them accountable as well as a way to eliminate human trafficking in this country, but also here in Massachusetts, sadly.
So speaking of transparency, one last thing that will take another minute or two, and the legislature, in this case, total lack of transparency. We talked to you last month about these shared appreciation mortgages, and for those who don't know what they are, I'm going to describe them, and please correct me if I'm wrong. A bank forecloses on a homeowner. A company, the Shared Appreciation Mortgage Company, is only one in Massachusetts, Blue Hub, rushes in, buys the home from the bank, sells it back to the original homeowner at a profit, charges them a higher interest rate than is the average thing, and part of the deal is they will share in the equity when the property is sold. There's litigation suggesting by some of the homeowners we were never told about the shared equity thing. When you were here last month and we asked you about that, was accurate, right? Was that inaccurate? Okay. Here's what you said. We were against any industry going to the State House, including Blue Hub, and looking to create an exception from our consumer protection laws. So if anything, we stand with the constituents and Bruce Marks from NACA, who brought this to our attention, because no one should be exempt from our consumer protection laws. And if someone's trying to do that, we should, all sort of flags should go up. Well, as you know, and I think people know now, in the Economic Development Bill, the Senate, with no hearing, no public notice, anything, puts it in the bill. It passes. Governor Healy signs it. She has a relationship with a woman who owns a Blue Hub, but she says they never discussed this thing. I have several questions. One, what's your reaction to the decision by the legislature and the governor to make this into law and provide them? And by the way, again, this is only one company this covers. It doesn't mention them in the legislation. It describes a kind of company which coincidentally only Blue Hub satisfies the criteria for. What's your reaction to this exemption from consumer protection? And why should any company in any field ever be exempt from consumer protection laws?
They shouldn't, and we opposed it. And actually, I wanted to call out Bruce because he wrote an article, I think, to the Globe, where I said it's just inaccurate, and sort of lumped me and the office in with other folks, where I said, wait a minute, let me be crystal clear. We have opposed this. And we have lended our advocacy to constituents in that opposition. We've also flagged that, yes, there's a court litigation right now by constituents who felt as though this program did not benefit them. That is ongoing, and there could be a result soon. And I know many folks said, wait until that resolves itself. We don't win every battle at the State House, and I don't want to suggest that we don't work closely with the folks there. There are some things, of course, in the econ bill that we appreciated. We worked with the governor on, we worked with the state legislature on, but on this particular provision, we did not think it should have passed.
Did you ever discuss it with Governor Healy?
No, but I will say we discussed it with her team, right? Just like we do with every other provision within the econ bill. But we made it crystal clear to folks in the State House and the administration that we were opposed to this, and that we have some of the strongest consumer protection laws in the country. And if you give one product or one company an exception, you open up the floodgates potentially for others to also then begin to seek out an exception. And that's concerning to us. And on top of that, as we do this work, as I do this work, and I have to go to conferences to work with my fellow colleagues, you have folks who will lobby, you have folks coming up to us pushing for whatever product they're selling. And we've been saying, if it's a good product, you shouldn't be in fear of our consumer protection laws, because they're designed for folks that are looking to deceive and not be transparent with our constituents to make a profit. And so now we are sitting with the possibility of having to come up with some regulations. So we're figuring this out.
You're in charge of the regulations, correct?
Yes, and we still have to figure this out.
I don't know if I assume you're aware of this, that my understanding is that a motion for summary judgment was filed this morning by Blue Hub asking that the whole case be dismissed. I assume their argument is that and
I wasn't aware of that because I was outside in the rain giving out.
I quickly read this at 5 minutes to 11, but I believe their argument is that this law, which went into effect by emergency preamble, meaning immediately, is retroactive, and if they are right, that would wipe out all this litigation. Is it retroactive?
We'll see. I have to still review it, and even us getting involved in terms of the regulations, we're still reviewing the language because it's not necessarily mandatory. There's a back and forth. So I told my team, or I tell the public, give us a little bit of time, and we'll also have to review what summary judgment motion they actually filed. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, again, I just read it briefly. Just one more thing on this. Beyond the merits, it would seem to me, and maybe this is naive, but I don't think it is, if the legislature was proud of granting an exemption from consumer protection for a company that is in litigation being sued by homeowners, low-income homeowners who believe that it's a predatory operation, that the least they would do is introduce an amendment in the light of day so that people like you, people like the homeowners have an opportunity to lobby against it, speak against it, rather than speaking against it after there's law. Is there any excuse for them doing this in the dark of night?
I can't answer. I can't speak for the legislature. I can speak for myself as AG and my office. We absolutely believe in transparency. Even when we are making decisions and also filing legislation, we have the ability to file legislation as well. We want not only to be transparent, we want to have hearings, we want to engage a range of stakeholders as we go into the State House to push for legislation that would help us improve outcomes on a whole host of issues for our constituents. That's what we do. And it's a bottom-up approach. It's a transparent approach. And even if folks don't necessarily like where we land, at the end of the day, we recognize that process is so important, sometimes more important than the outcome itself. So in this, we registered our opposition. We don't win every battle, just like on competitive electric supply. I'm still pushing for that. That is an issue that must be dealt with before we have more consumers going into millions of dollars of losses because of an industry that is preying upon them. We haven't won that yet, so I'm doing my part.
Two last quick questions. As the person who will issue the regulations, are you the one who determines whether or not the statute, as the amendment as passed, is retroactive?
So we will figure this out in reviewing the legislation, reviewing the language, et cetera, and also figuring out what will go in those regulations. I just asked folks to give me a little bit of time.
Last question.
We've been dealing with a lot of things.
Understood. You mentioned process. Three homeowners have been in touch with us in the last 24 hours saying they're attempting to meet with you unsuccessfully. Will you meet with some of the homeowners affected here? From who believe they were victims of Blue Hub?
Oh, okay. I thought we had, but
well, if you they say you have, but you'd be willing to.
We'll follow up. Yeah, and let me tell you.
And you would be willing to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But let me actually say this. Many of the constituents who have brought these issues up, I know them from my previous council work.
Right.
When I stood
Understood.
with folks who did not have a successful outcome. I don't want to suggest that everyone didn't. There were some folks that benefited from this program.
Oh, there's no question,
But there
yeah.
were some who didn't, and many of them lived in Mattapan and Dorchester, where I was the city councilor, and I didn't have the authority to help. I couldn't go into court, et cetera. So I already knew what I was walking into, and so we're using the tools of our office to help. We're watching that litigation closely, and it's why we registered opposition.
Okay.
We know the details, we know the weeds.
Last thing, this is really, I'm sorry to belabor this, but to me, it's so outrageous and so important. Last question, just so I understand. When a company, forget this is not Blue Hub, so you can answer the question. When a company is exempted by statute from consumer protection, and they then deal with a consumer, and they intentionally lie to the consumer about what the terms of an agreement are, and the consumer says, you lied to me, I want to sue you, I can prove you lied to me, they're precluded from that suit by an exemption from consumer protection, are they not?
Well, it depends. So in the context, why we were concerned about this particular exemption is that it gives people an exemption. And now we have to go to the drawing board to figure out how we still make things applicable to them in the face of an exemption to our strong consumer protection laws. This is uncharted territory for the office. This is why we were concerned that if you do it for one particular model, that it could open up the floodgates for other exemptions. This is why we registered opposition every step of the way, including after passage. And so I want to be clear on that. And to the folks who, I thought folks of the team had already met with folks.
I could be wrong, I'm just reading texts I got.
But even the folks who are texting on this, we understand. We already know the details. I knew it from city council. Now it's our job to do what we can to protect them,
Fair enough.
and we will.
Thank you for your answers.
But we'll keep working. I mean, I hear you loud and clear, but I also hear those homeowners. Because I remember when I was on the city council, them coming into our office where they couldn't afford a lawyer. They couldn't afford to get any type of accountability. And there were several of them who had real concerns. So we will connect with them.
Got it.
And if it's not this, there may be some other laws that might be applicable, other ways to help.
Got it.
And we will.
Thank you.
You know, we have a lot of texts from people who feel that they've been shafted by their insurance company, not getting responses. One of them is this one: we have a child mental health support needs. So few service providers except insurance have to self-submit for reimbursement, but our insurance company makes it almost impossible to submit. One officer said, mail the documents. Literally months went by. We had signature proof they got it. They never processed our submission. We resubmitted it electronically twice. Finally, some process, but codes were wrong, so we didn't get full reimbursement. We are
So-
$10,000 in the hole already. They named the insurance company, and they basically say that they do not. The rest of the email is too long, but
This is an email or text.
this is a text.
So this person,
I have the
I would
phone
say
number.
anyone who is text, well, we'll take that from you.
Okay.
But I don't know if you reply, so I'll just say
I
it.
didn't reply.
But 617-727-8400 is our consumer protection line that people can call. Always want to put that out there.
Yep.
They can also go through our website, but I understand that can be more challenging. And so we can also take information for folks to follow up. We have divisions that are front-facing to help folks with consumer protection issues, working with companies to resolve them and, on their behalf, and working with the consumer. So please do reach out to us, and we can follow up.
We only have 20 seconds left. Marjorie's too
quick.
shy to ask this question.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how to cook a turkey, so can she come to your house for
Well, I
Thanksgiving?
won't be cooking a turkey.
You're not
you
cooking
on
either.
either?
I'm so glad to hear that,
What are
Angie.
you
No,
doing?
I am not.
What are you doing?
So mom can cook. So and
Good
she's-
move.
But the sad part is, did I say the sad part? Love you, honey. I'm going to be with my husband's family in Connecticut, and they do a good turkey, but they do a fried one
Ooh.
and an oven baked.
Oh, there you go.
So they do both. But I can't stress this enough. Happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you.
You too.
Anyone who's living in any type of fear, know that your AG has your back. And as we go into the new year, we're going to fight like hell
A
to
lot of
protect
trans
you.
people on the
Fight
text
like
as
hell
well.
to protect you. So we're ready. So enjoy the holiday. Happy holidays to everyone, and happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you,
Thank you so
Attorney
much,
General. Thank you so
Attorney
much.
General Andrea Campbell.